Welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. Join me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, for real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and masculine, you learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
Together, working at a practical level, you'll learn to trust that everything that is happening is for you, your growth, and ultimate freedom.
Our circumstances don't matter. It's only how we relate to them that does.
Get ready to befriend the wisdom of your body and the power of your mind.
Break Free and Trust starts now.
And welcome to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jacqueline.
And in this episode, Jacqueline and I are going to explore the action of just sitting with it or being with your feelings. This idea of just being with your feelings or fully feeling your feelings is something many of us have heard from therapists, coaches, or spiritual mentors. Just sitting with is a concept that is also preached by all the sages of the ages. What does just sitting with your feelings even mean? How is this not just avoidance of action? Why is it paradoxically considered an act of courage in spiritual teachings? And what is the benefit and what are the costs of sitting with your feelings? All of this, much more in the next hour. And as always, it's a live show. So we'll be taking questions in the second half. Put them in the chat or call in at 1-800-930-2819. And so, Jacqueline, why don't we start with the first question I had from the intro? What does it mean to just be with your feelings?
Feels like a question that I answer every day.
Right. Yeah. What does it actually mean?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think my answer to you today would look very different than my answer to you a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And I'll explain why, and then I'll answer your question.
All right.
The why it would look different is that as our capacity to do just that, sitting with our feeling changes, what it means actually is entirely different. Because as our capacity grows, our ability to be with ourselves shifts and changes. And I answer the question like that to begin with, because, in the last few days, I've had the opportunity to do exactly that. And it means something very different for me now than it did even a month ago. So what does it mean? Sitting with your feelings sounds kind of woo-woo, or at least that's what I'm told by my clients. And what I've heard is, so you mean I just need to sit with it and life's going to get better and everything's going to change? And the answer is yes and no. Sitting with our feelings means sitting with what happens in our bodies before we intellectualize or react physically. And let me break that down. An event happens. You have a fight with your husband. You have an argument with your boss. You have a family interaction that doesn't sit well with you. Generally, what we do as people is we want to discharge that feeling as quickly as possible because the feeling itself is uncomfortable. And so we move into action. We reach out to a friend. We pick up the phone. We react and start a fight and create a whole bunch of drama based on our own inner programming, which we can get into in a minute. What sitting with our feelings actually means is the moment that it almost slows down time, actually. I'll put it that way. And what I mean by that is the moment that event, external event happens, there is a physiological reaction within our bodies. There might be a tightness in our chests. There might be a tightness in our shoulders. Our heart might beat really quickly. Our armor might begin to come back on. And in that moment, we have an opportunity to slow down time by taking a couple of deep breaths by choosing not to distract or discharge or reach out, but actually to be with what's showing up in our bodies, which will tend to be incredibly uncomfortable. And the reason it's incredibly uncomfortable, in my belief and in those of the teachers that I subscribe to, is that generally speaking, anytime there's a reaction in our bodies, it's because what's reacting isn't the moment. What we're reacting to is an unintegrated emotional experience from our past that's being woken up by the flip of a switch, which is why we often end up reacting way out of what word am I looking for?
Proportion.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Way out of proportion to what's actually happening in any given moment. So I can give you an example.
Yeah, I was about to ask, can you give us an example of what you just talked about? Something from the
Sure.
past that's been triggered.
Sure. I'm just trying to think of a recent example. I'll give you a very recent example. Your friend asks you if you can drive another friend home. Your logical mind says it doesn't make any sense. I live across town. And so you say, no, it doesn't really make sense. She can take a taxi. I don't have time to do that. And then what happened in my body in that moment was a huge panic reaction, which was so out of whack with what I was being asked and how I responded to it. And that panicky feeling, I was lucky. I was sitting on a plane, so I had no opportunity to do anything but sit with it. And so I sat with it and I breathed with it. And what actually happened for me was this awareness of, oh, you just spoke what was true for you in this moment, which was you not being the people pleaser you're used to being. And the panic that came up was the very fear of what happens if I don't do the good thing, the right thing, which was what put the people pleaser there in the first place. And so by sitting with our feelings, what we actually get to in many ways is our internal programming, which we then begin to break up the longer we sit with it. Does that answer your question?
It does. And it sounds like the way you describe that, because it's like this patterning or seeds that are planted in us that anytime a similar experience shows up, we're going to almost react in a similar way until such a time as we break that patterning.
So in a lot of ways, what I've come to really understand in my own experience and in that of my clients is that what really sits under all of our reactivity is fear. And we've learned all kinds of ways to not be afraid. We've learned all kinds of patterns of being. We've learned all kinds of behaviors to distract, etc., so that we don't even know that what's underneath what we're experiencing is fear. And when we don't react, when we don't get angry, when we don't push people away, when we don't gossip, when we don't run out the door and exercise the minute that we feel uncomfortable.
Grab a drink, another substance. Go and jump on social media.
Absolutely. There's 4,000 different ways that we can do it. I was just thinking of some of my own, but yes, thank you.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. When we don't do those things, what we're left feeling is this underlying discomfort that when we give ourselves permission to feel it, the discomfort is actually profound because it's the discomfort that's been alive in us since we were really, really small. When the fear of someone turning their back on us, or somebody not liking us, or somebody deserting us actually meant life or death. Because as a young human, we depend on the people around us to love us. So we develop these patterns to make sure that we get the love that we need. But what we are doing is we are masking the discomfort that sits underneath. And that discomfort creates most of the drama that we project out into the world in order to protect that little person. But what it also does is it allows whatever is uneasy in us to stay in our physiology in such a way that even if life is not stressful, which for most of us we can't really say, life is full of lots of different stresses, there is an underlying stress in our physiology designed to continue to protect us. And with that underlying stress, we are much easily triggered in our day-to-day life.
So this is, breaking down this is a survival-based mechanism that creates these patterns of behavior that's meant to protect us, because at the time, it literally feels like life or death if these things aren't met. And as we grow older, we outgrow them, but we don't outgrow the patternings of it all.
We also don't outgrow the life or death feelings of it all.
What are, and you mentioned the word fear in there that may be underlying these. What are some of the common fears that would be behind some of these patterns you're talking about?
I'll name some of them and then I'll let you name some of the
Sure.
other ones. And that was a great summary, by the way. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of not being worthy, fear of not being loved, fear of not being good enough. Those are some of the ones that come to mind right away.
Yeah.
Any others come to mind?
Just common one: fear of financial insecurity, fear of humiliation,
fear of not belonging.
Fear of not belonging. Yeah, not being safe. That genre.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, like that. Those encompass. I'm going to throw a number out there. 80 to 90% of sort of the fears out there could be captured in that broad category of what is that systematic driver of some of our reactive behaviors of most people.
Yeah.
Until they look at it.
Yeah.
Or until they feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I wonder, I'm curious if you would describe it differently. What does it mean? What does it mean to you as a man? And in men's work, because most of the work I do is with women, what does it mean to be with or sit with your feelings?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I'm answering this from a masculine standpoint or more from someone who's a little more heady and intellectual than body focused, but like the same underlying causes that you're talking about. Yeah, childhood experiences or traumas manifesting in a survival-based mechanism called the ego that has these reactive points that, when challenged, when its fear buttons are hit, wants to react in this sort of almost predictable repeated pattern. And if we just move into reaction or move into distraction, the pattern it's like a record with the groove getting deeper and deeper every time we react or suppress or move away from that feeling. And the actual sitting with the feeling is moving into this place of complete inaction. And when I mean sitting with it, I don't mean intellectualizing it. I don't mean sitting there thinking about it and looping around in the patterns of it. I mean, I'm not going to think about this. I'm just going to feel the discomfort of this thing. Oh, I'm so angry. And like, oh, I feel upset without trying to make sense of it. And in the not thinking, the not doing, allowing a new inspired consciousness to emerge about responding maybe in a different way than we have each and every time. And my experience with it is, when I go into that place and sit with it, I have the body experience that you're talking about, but also I get this experience of inspiration. A new thought form or thought wave emerges that's not part of my old pattern. I'm not even sure where it came from, but it's like I'm connecting with a higher consciousness in that place of non-reaction that allows me to now take a different path and start to change the groove in the record that I've been reacting from.
So you spoke that brilliantly. And I think that you're almost like many steps down this path of sitting with in your description.
Possibly,
because when we first start sitting with our sensations. So, as Chris said, it's not our thinking mind that we're talking about. What we're sitting with is actually physical sensations in our body. When we first start sitting with them, they are not inspirational. They're incredibly uncomfortable. For the most part, as far as, at least in my experience, the inspiration comes with practice at being with those places.
Well, you know what's really interesting, and I think is we're onto something here. It's like, um, I don't have the body experience really. Maybe at the margin, mine is a very mental experience where I'm sitting there, the discomfort, and it's my head wants to explode with thought. It's looping on a history, it's looping on an event, it's looping on what that person said, and it's all very, very mental. And all I want to do is the thinking to stop. And so I distract myself. I want to distract myself from the thinking, or write that text, or pick up the phone and lash out, or do something like that.
So I'm going to challenge you.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can't say that I'm right or you're wrong. And actually, neither, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. We all operate in this world. I remember in my original training in Chinese medicine, one of the things that we were taught to look at is this person's imbalance showing up on the mental, the physical, or the spiritual? And that would be the doorway in to working with them. And so I think that there's some of us that are naturally much more physical in body, some of us that are much more naturally mental, and some of us that are much more naturally spiritual. But I would suggest that physiologically, when something happens to us, the first experience that we have is a physical one. Then we make meaning of it and move into a mental space. The challenge with us is that we've never been taught how to be with our physical sensations or even notice that they're happening, because we move so quickly. We live in a world that's very mental, and we reward the mental. And so a piece of this is when I'm working with a client, as an example, they can tell me their thought pattern as a trigger response. And my questioning will go into, what's the first thing you noticed as these thoughts started to show up? What do you mean? Well, what was happening in your body? And they might say, my brow got sweaty. What happened before that? My shoulders got tight. What happened before that? There was a tightness in my chest. And the entire intention of that line of conversation is to reel things back to the physiological, to notice the first moment the body felt like it was in trouble. Because in the closer we can get back to the beginning point of a reaction, the more quickly we can actually create a shift in patterning, and we can interrupt the neural network that will naturally move down a specific line of thinking or create a specific behaviors. So I think that physiology is actually primary, but it's not something that we're used to paying attention to. Right. We learn how to override it.
I think that's right. And even my own case, like I'm aware, I'm much more aware of my body response now than I was previously. And mine is like if I know when I'm experiencing disease or anxiety, it always manifests itself first with a bit of a shallower breathing will show up, and my pace of speech will probably speed up. Yeah. And that'll be my sign that something is shifting within me that'll give me pause to, okay, this is not the time to formulate a response or to react, but to go and figure out what's happening. But it took me a long time to get to that place, to recognize that. It wasn't where I started.
Right. Yeah. And so that's why when you were talking about inspiration comes with a tremendous amount of practice in this place. And when I say practice, I don't mean practice for 3 days or 3 hours. I mean, this is a lifetime practice, actually. And there's a tremendous amount of freedom on the other side. But and some of you may call me a slow learner. And the truth is, I am actually very much a slow learner. I've been doing this work for 30 years and I'm still doing it almost every day, right? Like I had an interaction with my oldest son earlier this afternoon, and I noticed immediately a sensation in my chest that was super tight. And I wanted to go and do things. And I sat and I breathed with it. And it was incredibly uncomfortable. And it's passed. And one of the ways, actually, I would say one of the people whose work has had a huge impact on both me personally and in my practice is Kristen Neff. I think I mentioned her on an earlier podcast. Kristen Neff is a psychologist whose focus is really on self-compassion. And when her work first arrived in my space, it's work that meant no sense to me. Lost my speech. It's work that didn't make any sense to me. And it didn't make any sense to me because I actually didn't know what it meant to be self-compassionate. I thought I did, but I didn't. And one of the first pieces of something that she calls a self-compassion break leads you to is a place of naming what you're feeling in a given moment. So even just taking a moment in a triggering time and she suggests that you put your left hand on your heart and your right hand on top and name, like, I'm feeling really angry right now. I'm feeling really afraid right now. I'm feeling really whatever it is. And taking a moment to acknowledge what's happening in your body is a beautiful first step to learning how to be with and sit with what's showing up. And that's something that I wish we taught our kids in school, because that's the beginning of being able to be really emotionally intelligent, not just around other people's interactions, but in terms of our relationship with ourselves. I mean, imagine what you would have done in your life had you been taught that early on, right? Like, what kind of pattern interrupt might have happened in that moment of like, wow, I'm feeling really rejected right now. Well, maybe I would go and ask the question to a family member or name it, and what I might have gotten in response would have looked really different than whatever patterns I created to protect myself from.
Yeah. I think it's even more interesting. You can go back further and just wish someone tells us when we're 17 or 18, hey, by the way, you've been screwed up by your childhood. You just don't know how yet, but you might want to look at it and then start trying to understand what these things are and what these feelings are and where they're coming from.
And I know you don't mean it when you say this, but I'm going to name this because I think it's super important. Is I've been screwed up by my childhood doesn't mean my mother and my father screwed me up.
It means everybody has been.
Well, but what it means is I've been screwed up by my own reactions to my environment and the stories that I've told myself about my environment. Yeah. And I name that because right now we're living in a culture of massive victim mentality.
Yeah, I know. And this is the opposite of the victim mentality. It's more just a realization, okay, I'm an individual person that's been put into this place where I've needed to fit in to survive. And I may have had all these maladaptive strategies to get there that aren't going to serve me anymore. To move forward in life, I need to shed the skin and look at what those things are. And that'll be something that's worth doing, versus we're not told that until something breaks. And then we have to go take a look at it and say, what just happened? Oh, I see. I've been fear driven most of my life and I had no idea.
So you just named a process essentially that we go through. What makes it so hard? to sit with our feelings?
I think we're afraid to look what's behind it. I think we're afraid to see those insecurities, those fears, those limiting beliefs that actually lurk below the surface of it. And it's called the shadow self or the false self. That's really behind all these actions. We don't want to believe we have an inferiority complex. We don't want to believe we fear rejection. We don't want to know any of this stuff. And as soon as we stop and pause and start looking at it, we start to see remnants of it and we look away and we move away from that. So I think it's really a fear of facing ourselves is what drives that in my mind.
Can you speak to that a little bit more? The shadow, I understand where you're coming from, but I think that the shadow in reference to this piece feels almost, doesn't feel as vulnerable to me as the place that we're looking at actually feels. Like there's an intense, if I go there, if I sit there and I experience what's really underneath it, there's an intense vulnerability there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've developed a survival mechanism we just call the ego that has created this identity for me. I'm so and so. I'm associated with this group. I'm an achiever, or I'm a this. I'm a that. That false persona, that ego, has been used to survive in the world, and it's done that by hiding the actual fears from us because it doesn't think we could survive. It doesn't think we could survive actually being with the actual trauma that happened. It was too much for us. If we were to experience it, would have died. So the ego is now trying to protect us from it.
So what is, life. Give me an example of what's underneath the achiever. What is it?
So underneath the achiever is a fear of failure and I'm not enough and a fear of rejection, that if whatever happened earlier in life, if I wasn't special or if I didn't perform or if I wasn't good, I would be abandoned by my peer group, my parents, my group, and I would die. So I am going to go out and achieve, and I'm going to create a persona of achievement to hide the fact that I'm really afraid. I don't have a self-worth, that I'm enough. And if anyone sees that, I won't survive, including myself. And so when we go into these places of sitting with it, we get this glimpse of that for the first time, and it's terrifying. And the ego says, nope, don't look there. Go right back out to achieve, go distract yourself, go back to that identity. That's who you really are. We don't need to look there. And life will go on and on until something, often for most people, something happens that you have no choice but to take a really hard look at it, because life cannot go forward anymore by distracting yourself from it or wearing that mask.
Well, it's not necessarily that life can't go forward
or thrive. Life, yes. Yeah. Life can't thrive anymore. You got this, come to this place where, wait a minute,
you've hit a wall.
Suffering.
Yeah, and you've hit a wall.
Suffering, yeah.
Beautiful. So I think we'll take a break and come back right after that.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Tune in to Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living with me, Jacqueline.
And me, Chris, on Transformation Talk Radio, every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and to heal, and how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Witness the field of potential that arises when you take personal responsibility and become the divine creator in your own life.
Visit theway-healing.com for more information.
Hey everybody, oh my goodness, we have got talk radio for all of that.
Really, thank you for blazing the trail for women in talk radio and just being such an inspiration to me and so many other people. What you're doing is so awesome. And, without people like you there to really step out of the box and go for it, I don't know if someone like me would have ever ended up here, but I'm so happy to be here. And I just want to thank you for everything you're doing. You're one of my major inspirations.
What if your training isn't enough? The Multicultural Mindset Podcast invites counselors and therapists to unlearn the one-size-fits-all approach. This isn't cultural competence. It's a way of being that brings racialized experiences from the margins to the very center of care. Let's stop pathologizing Black pain and start challenging the system that created the bias in the first place. Visit newseasons.training to subscribe.
Living a life by design. It's the journey back to you and living 365 days of purpose with host Esther Graham. Tune in every second and fourth Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific. Discover that what is possible is already in you. God designed a phenomenal life for you. At Living a Life by Design, Esther helps you ignite the energy behind your personal journey. For more information, visit fddwomen.com.
Parents, do you have
cut the shit? Stop struggling.
Welcome back, everybody. First, I want to really thank you for the intensity with which you just described that process, because when we were talking earlier, it felt very, very heady to me. And you really got into the depths of why going there is actually so terrifying.
Even my ego wants to avoid it, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We all work really hard to avoid it. But I think one of the things that I want to name is that there's a common humanity in what you spoke. And what I mean by that is every one of us is walking around working with some version of this at perhaps a different level of practice and experience with it. But this is not something that, your neighbor down the street was immune to. This is part of the human condition. And so I name that because, one, it's really hard for us in those places, partly because we feel really alone. And we feel like we're the only one that's going through this. And when we begin to recognize that every one of us has created our own story, and every one of us has created our own behavior patterns around working with that story, and we see that we're not alone in our experience, it becomes a little bit easier to deal with. And it actually can become a talking point in our conversations with people in our lives who are willing to engage in that conversation. During the break, Chris and I were talking a little bit, and one of the things that we were talking about was this idea that over time, we really develop the observer or a witness within us that watches as this process happens, so that rather than getting swept up in it, we actually become an observer of the process itself. Do you want to share a little more about that?
Yeah, it's not that this ego identity ever fully goes away, or suddenly we don't have these fears or limiting beliefs or this programming. It's all still there. It's just that we become aware of it. It's not unconsciously driving our lives and then we're calling it fate. That's not happening anymore. It's like it's not like we're moving to the light, but we're grabbing this darkness and pulling it into the illumination. And once we begin to see it, or once you see it, you start seeing its patternings, you start predicting it. And when these feelings come into the body, you can move into this place of, oh, what's going on here? And pretty quickly, prescriptively, you can get to this conclusion, oh, I see what's about to happen. I'm driven by this fear or this belief system. And it's not necessarily true. So now I'm not at the mercy of it. I don't have to react to it. I can now change the way I'm going to respond to it. Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And, if I may, I would say that there's, in that process, something really beautiful is happening. It doesn't always feel so beautiful, just for what it's worth. This is a really tough process, actually, to go through. but I'll share something really personal. Um, over the past few weeks, there have been many opportunities for me to look at the part of me that has lived most of her life as a people pleaser. And I used to call myself a people pleaser in recovery, but the truth is, I haven't quite recovered. I'm still in it. And the beauty of it is that the universe won't rest until we are free. And what I mean by that is your universe, your little world or big world, will give you opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to face yourself, to see where you're getting in the way of being able to walk through life free of your limiting stories. And so Chris and I we had a conversation last week where I was like, and then this opportunity showed up, and then this event happened, and then this event happened. And there was this part of me that in the past, I might have gone, well, I've never really played a victim, but I may have gone, oh, why me? Like, why is this happening to me? And what actually happened was I got this feeling of excitement. And the feeling of excitement was, oh, I feel like I'm getting close. I feel like the universe is giving me more and more and more opportunities with less and less space between them, because something in me is ready to break free from this. And in that moment, there was also this space of like this coming to the center of ourselves. It's an incredible adventure. And there's so much learning in it if we're willing to see it with a growth mindset, rather than a victim mindset. Because from a victim mindset, this process really sucks. But from a growth mindset, we get to actually experience the possibility of what happens, what's on the other side, and not what's on the other side of the people pleaser, let's say in my example. What's on the other side of carrying around that unintegrated experience in my body is what was alive before I told myself all of these limiting beliefs, where the world wasn't so small, where the world was full of possibility, not to show me all the ways in which I needed to please to survive, but to show me what was possible before those things even existed.
Yeah, back into the wonder size of a child, eh? Coming to look at all this stuff, right? Nothing to fear, nothing to worry about, just full of wonder.
Yeah.
And it comes back to this, it's an objective truth that life is simply a relationship with your experience.
Yeah.
And the choice that you have in your life is, what is my relationship to that experience? Am I going to be a victim, or am I going to be a creator? And I'm a victim, then I'm going to look at it's happening to me, and I'm going to try to set up my life so if I have triggers, I'm going to do everything I can to avoid them, and I'm going to be angry at people that set off my triggers, and I'm going to try to change people's behavior around me so I don't get triggered, because I'm a victim to life. That's my relationship. And if I'm a creator, I'm going to say, hold on a second, these triggers are mine. They've come from somewhere in my past, and I'm going to be able to create and find freedom if I investigate them and see what's behind these things, so I don't get triggered as often. And when I get triggered, I'm going to relish it as an opportunity to go a little bit deeper in what's this belief system that's underlying it that I'm unaware of, because it must be driving my life right now. And trigger after trigger, slowly but surely, as you sit with this stuff, you begin to feel it fully through, make sense of it. You'll be free of it.
I think it's important for us to talk about physiology for a second with that, in that when we get tripped up or we get triggered, our physiology moves with us. And we talked earlier about this flight or fight response or a survival response. When we get tripped into that place, we don't get to think logically. We move into reactivity very quickly. And it's hard to come back down from that. We have to go through a cycle of neurotransmitters being released to protect us in terms of our survival.
Is it fight or flight we're talking about here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fight, flight, or freeze, or whatever it is. Yeah.
But there's more terms that have been attributed to that now, which I'm not remembering, but yes. And the opportunity with this witness is to catch that before those events, those internal events happen in our physiology. And I think it's worth sharing a couple of ways to be able to actually calm our physiology. And you spoke to one of them earlier on, which was, so I notice that when I get triggered, my breath actually gets really shallow. Mm-hmm. And so I take a couple of deep breaths to calm me down. One of the breaths that I know works really beautifully, and I find myself doing it anytime that I get into this place, is to inhale through the nose for the count of 4, to hold the breath or suspend the breath for the count of 7, and then to exhale through an open mouth, almost like with a whistle sound, for the count of 8. The longer the exhale, the more likely our nervous system will begin to calm itself down. And in the same way that we can get triggered into a survival mode, we can also trigger our nervous system into a parasympathetic state or a quiet mode. And there are so many different ways to do that. I just think it's worth naming.
Yeah.
Are there any quick tricks that you would name?
Yeah, I mean, again, I come at it from the different direction, and mine are more verbal or mental cues that I use. One is a mantra that, in addition to just noticing my breaths and making a conscious effort to take a long, deep breath through the nose and an exhale 4 or 5 times for the body, I'll notice my mind racing or overthinking. And I like to call myself an overthinker in recovery too, but I'm still working on it. That in my past has been one of overthinking. And so my mantra in that is out of my head and into my heart, out of my head and into my heart, over and over again. And it really does have an impact. It's like, and when I'm doing that, I'm visualizing my mind as a rough sea, wind blowing, rain coming down. And as I repeat the mantra off with my eyes closed, I'm visualizing that sea becoming calmer and calmer and calmer until it's like flat glass with the sun coming up, maybe a loon in the distance, that type of thing. And that has a tremendous impact on slowing down my thinking and bringing my physiology down.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And then one more thing I'd add to that is when I'm in interaction with people, I can't get away to do that. My trick is to, whatever's happening, I pause and I say, okay, I'm feeling this. Chris, who do you choose to be in this situation? And get myself out of what do I need to do? And can I establish who I want to be? I want to be kind, empathetic, and compassionate. And again, that has an immediate impact on me.
So I think, one of the things that comes up for me when you speak that is out of my head and into my heart, out of my head and into my heart. For me, that might look like what I said earlier with a left hand on my heart and right hand on top, which is like to hold myself, right? Because this action actually releases oxytocin from my brain that says, you're cared for, you're okay. And finding some way, I think Peter Levine does something where he sticks his thumbs under the armpit and hands here, which is holding yourself, just tending to yourself for a moment, because oftentimes we are in the midst of exactly what's like, it's happening in real time. We don't have a chance to just step away.
Yeah.
So to calm ourselves down, to be able to say, hey, you're in your head, or hey, quietly, your heart's racing and you're about to react. What do you need in this moment to calm yourself down? And then to be able to ask the question that you asked was, who do I want to be? And, you know, you speak about who do I want to be in this moment? I want to be kind. I want to be caring. I want to be whatever. And there's times where I can go there as well. But the first thing that comes up for me is the awareness that whatever part of me is reacting is a very young part of me.
Mm-hmm.
And that young 2-year-old, 3-year-old baby, she doesn't need to be told who she needs to be. What she needs is to be met with tenderness, not by other people, but by me. Right? Because I'm the very one who rejected her in the first place when she felt scared. I put on all kinds of armor to protect her from that fear. But the truth was, she was scared.
Mm-hmm.
And she needs somebody to hold her in that moment. And that person that she needs is me. We spend so much of our time looking outside of ourselves for our partners to meet us in that way, for our friends to meet us, for our parents. It's their responsibility to meet us. But actually, it's our responsibility to meet ourselves in those moments and give ourselves what we need to calm ourselves down.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about this work, it's hard, but it's like, what are the triggers? The triggers we have that create this reactivity, they're pointing us in the direction of the parenting we need to do for ourselves. Like it's all been sort of divinely set up this way.
Yeah.
Like these triggers and reactivity points aren't there to plague us. They're there to show us the way. It's the way through and the way back to ourselves. Each and every time one of these comes up, it's pointing, it's time to look there. You're having these feelings for a reason. These feelings are serving you to find your way back to self, an opportunity to shed a layer of ego and come back to your true self.
Which is why it's an adventure and it's exciting. But what, our conversation could sound a little bit fluffy, but I'm going to make it really real. When we don't do this for ourselves, we live in reactivity. We live in reaction, and we actually create violence in the world around us by blaming, by shaming, by discharging energy and projecting it on the people in our lives because we don't know how to be with it ourselves. And we create drama. We create traumas for other people because we're not taking personal responsibility for ourselves. And so while the idea of sitting with might sound fluffy, I would go so far as to say, if we were all able to sit with what was really sitting under the surface for us, all of this warring and fighting and violence that's happening in the world around us would go away because there'd be no need for it.
Yeah, I mean, I like how we're in the spirit of the non-fluffiness, exactly as you said. I spent the first half of my life not understanding any of this. This is relatively new to me. And in that process, when tough times got tough, I got into blaming, distracting, not being with, and ultimately not just verbal violence, but physical violence to the point, and I've talked to this on this podcast before, that I ended up losing my job, my family, and out of a jail cell for committing an act of violence, all because I had no idea how to sit with anything that was going on. I all thought it was all happening to me. I didn't realize this was what was happening was inside of me and not outside of me. I had no idea. I was totally unaware until I got to that point where, for me in my story, I had no choice. There's no other option but to sit with it. I didn't put up my hand and say, I'm going to get enlightened. I'm going to sit with it. I literally had no choice but in a jail cell to start sitting with it. And the more I did that, the more I brought on some of these techniques, I began to see the power of understanding these patterns of behavior and breaking them down and moving away from them.
I want to challenge what you just spoke.
Yeah.
You actually did have a choice. In that moment, in that jail cell, you had a choice. The choice was to continue to hold on to the beliefs that you had held on to that brought you to where you were, or to face yourself and shift them. And that's a choice. It's a choice. And it's a conscious choice that each one of us has an opportunity to make. Some of us are brought to our knees and given what feels like no choice, because the no choice is for you would have killed yourself.
Yeah, and the choice, I guess, the choice that was, I felt I had divine inspiration, was one of surrender, and the complete admission of powerlessness. That all the things I was trying to do to modify the external situation had not worked, and I needed to completely give up control and turn it all over to a power greater than myself, whatever that was, but really putting myself in this place of powerlessness. And that's what sort of brings me back where I started the show, is when I find, for me particularly, when I sit with it and I drop below my pattern thinking, a new thought process, a new consciousness emerges in there that then starts to guide me. And it happened very quickly for me that all of a sudden I said, oh, wow, in this place of quiet, in this place of letting go of the need to control, these new thoughts, this new radio station is starting to be played that's now guiding me in a completely different direction. These aren't my ideas. I don't know where they've come from, but I'm going to start taking that intuition from that inspired part of me and following that. And so my process now is, in any situation now, is to, can I find that place to be with whatever's happening, to just to find my relationship with the experience and drop below my thinking mind and give it time for that inspired thought and consciousness to emerge and then guide my next action. And that's been my process in all of this.
And I think you've just described the process in all of this in your words through your experience, right? This whole process is one of surrender.
Yeah.
It's surrendering armor. It's surrendering masks. It's surrendering stories. It's learning how to be able to say, and it's really hard, especially if people around you aren't doing the same work. But it's learning how to be able to say, I feel really insecure right now. I feel really lost right now. I feel like I have no idea what to do right now. To say the things that we don't speak in our society, and to surrender this aura of I've got my shit together and everything's okay. It's actually to get to the place where it's okay for it to not be okay. The truth is, everybody's walking around pretending to be okay. And all of us are needing to surrender those stories in order to be able to get to what sits underneath them, which ultimately is the gift of surrender, which is freedom.
And it has this, and you said it before, it has this compounding effect. Like, gosh, if everyone wanted to do this, we wouldn't be at war anymore. But it really does start with ourselves doing it. And because once we start this process ourselves and really start sitting with it and seeing how our own, our own survival mechanisms are kicked in to make us act certain ways, and do the work to let go of those patterns of behavior and recognize it in others out of nowhere. And this is my experience. The amount of empathy that gets generated for other people is profound, because you start seeing other people. It's like, oh, they're going through what I went through. They just don't know it yet. They don't necessarily know what they're doing. They're reacting that way. It's coming from a place of fear. That's not really who they are. And all I can do is try to forgive them, create space for them, and love them, and hope they find their way back to themselves. But the last thing I'm going to do is attack them. The last thing I'm going to do is try to make their burden heavy. As I say, they don't know what they're doing. And that just leads to that space for that person to heal themselves.
And ultimately, the doorway to that space is to begin yourself by taking chances in your relationships, Maybe it's with your husband or wife. Maybe it's with your girlfriend or boyfriend. Maybe it's with a close friend or a parent or a sibling, to be able to actually start working with this idea of what would it feel like to say, I feel insecure, or I feel scared, or I feel like I can't breathe in this moment, and actually name what's really happening for you. Because in so doing, what you do is create an invitation for that person to be able to meet you in a different place, but you also create an opportunity for them to meet themselves in a different place. Because naming those things stops looking like weakness and it starts looking like courage.
I live by so many little mantras and hacks, and one of them just showed up for me, and particularly in relation with others, is I'm very aware that my ego always wants to win and to be right. That's its modus operandi, because that's what keeps me safe. If I'm always right and I always win, then that's the armor that's going to keep me safe. But my higher self, my true self, it just seeks to understand. It just seeks to understand what's happening. It has no interest or attachment to being right, no attachment to the outcomes. It's always just seeking to understand what is all of this, because it's just an experience, and I'm here to experience this and enjoy it. So I'm just here to understand it. I'm not here to try to control it.
And so from a body-centered person to a mentally centered person, I would say ultimately what I'm really seeking is a feeling of peace and ease. And for you, that looks like understanding, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that's a physiological experience.
Yeah. Well, even the word peace is like, I'll say I'm ultimately what I've come to understand through all this is my relationship with life is I'm seeking peace with myself and peace with my fellows. And I've always sort of thought that on the mental plane, but on a physical body plane as well.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach out to us.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
You've been listening to me, Chris.
And me, Jacqueline, on Break Free and Trust, a redesign for living.
Tune in every second and fourth Monday at 3 p.m. on Transformation Talk Radio for more real conversations about life, death, and everything in between.
Learn to connect with your intrinsic power to grow and heal, how to laugh at your own humanness and not take life too seriously.
Through healthy conversations between the feminine and the masculine, you will learn how to harness the power of relationship and the mirror to befriend your shadow, and to trust that any obstacle that gets in your way is there to help you grow.
For more information or to connect with us personally, visit theway-healing.com. That's theway-healing.com.